Welcome to the Civil War Trust War Department. Today we're going to be examining the most famous charge of the Civil War, the Civil War's most famous place, Pickett's Charge at Gettysburg. This pitted Confederate General Robert E. Lee, who had 75,000 soldiers at Gettysburg and used 12,000 of them on the third day of the battle, July 3rd, 1863, to attack across a mile of open field against prepared positions under Union General George Gordon Meade. Meade had 95,000 soldiers at Gettysburg, and maybe he only had 5,000 or so and a bunch of cannons defending his position, but he enjoyed interior lines that allowed him to shift tens of thousands of troops to the center while Lee attacked. Lee will reach the Union center, break part of the Union position, but get no further. We recently sat down with historians out on the field to discuss some of the issues surrounding Pickett's Charge. Let's hear what those historians have to say, and then we'll answer some of your questions.
I'm Doug Ullman with the Civil War Trust War Department, sitting here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania at the angle of Pickett's Charge. I'm joined by Tim Smith, a licensed battlefield guide here in Gettysburg for over 20 years, and by Sam Smith and Gary Edelman of the Civil War Trust. We're going to talk about Pickett's Charge, its importance for the Civil War, and what really happened here.
At 1 p.m., Lee bombards the Union defenses, hoping to soften them up. Meade responds, and together, they create the largest artillery barrage in the Western Hemisphere. Ultimately, Lee's bombardment fails. Nevertheless, Pickett's attack commences at 3 p.m. 12,000 men emerge from Seminary Ridge. They must cross 1 mile of open ground. Union artillery opens at long range and tears gaps in the Confederate line.
What do you think is going through Robert E. Lee's mind when he's looking at this field and saying, I'm going to send 14,000 men across miles of open ground? Does he have any prayer that this is actually going to work?
You know, if I'm Robert E. Lee, I've got to be thinking, well, I've made some gains the last 2 days. Maybe my artillery bombardment that just took place, maybe it helped drive some of the enemy away. You know, for the last year or so, I've been successful in a lot of what I've done, and that's that same army that I've beaten time and time again. And I think, Robert E. Lee goes into a battle every time wanting to win, and to him, winning is to destroy the enemy army, not just to push them away or something like that. He needs bold strokes to do it, and I think that Robert E. Lee, despite some waffling that day, is ready to win that day. He's not launching this thing on a maybe.
You know, one thing about Robert E. Lee I would add is that early in the war, these tactics that he used, this offensive nature of his attacks, making these attacks paid big dividends early in the war when the troops were not as well disciplined and inexperienced. But here, the Union Army of the Potomac is very experienced, and these are battle-hardened veterans on this ridge that day. These are many Pennsylvanians from Pennsylvania on their home soil, and they're going to fight a little bit harder than they might in Virginia.
Meade orders more than 20,000 reinforcements to converge upon the center. Ohio, New York, and Vermont troops position themselves upon the flank of the Confederate advance. The Confederates are moving into a great pincer of Yankees. The Southerners enter rifle range, and fewer than half cross the Emmitsburg Road. But with second and third line troops coming up, some manage to breach the Union position. A ferocious melee ensues.
How close was it in the fighting here at the angle?
I like to always talk about how, you have 12,000 Southerners making the attack, but maybe a few hundred actually cross the wall or get to where we sit right now and actually get behind. By the time the Southerners actually reach this point, they have pushed some of the Union soldiers away. They do see success on the horizon. They have, in a way, split the Union Army in two, but then they are confronted by thousands, if not several thousands, of Union troops converging upon them. And that's where these casualties come, is that a lot of them suffered on the way up and a lot suffered on the way back. It was Robert E. Lee's greatest defeat by far, which had been preceded by a moment of great hope.
We are constantly talking about why it is that the South lost the battle, and we don't dwell on the fact that the Northern Army did a very good job, that General Meade created a very good defensive position, and General Meade had reinforcements in position to be sent into the Union Center, I don't think it's that close. I think that over the years, just for the purpose of drama, we have tended to make it appear as if the Southern Army is almost breaking through the Union line and, oh, they're just driven back at the last moment. No. It was not even close. This charge was a disaster from the beginning. They had heavy losses coming across that open field. Only a few of them reached the area. It was not close.
Robert E. Lee, he did want to destroy the Union Army every chance he got, but oftentimes he wouldn't even break a Union line, but he would deal with an army, and more importantly perhaps, army commanders that would run away from him if he would strike a hard enough blow.
As tens of thousands of Union reinforcements arrive, the Confederate attackers dwindle. Those who cross the stone wall are either killed or captured. Lee's great moment of opportunity has become his greatest defeat by far. Scarcely half of the men who made the attack returned to Seminary Ridge.
I don't even think it's a close fight, close analysis in terms of comparing Gettysburg to Vicksburg. I don't think Gettysburg can claim to result in the loss of tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of square miles of territory for the Confederacy. Gettysburg could not have disrupted the Confederate effort the way that Vicksburg did. Vicksburg suddenly lost most of their access to salt and beef and all these key supplies. It cut the Confederacy in two very viably. I don't even see them in the same ballpark in terms of importance. But I still call Gettysburg a very solid turning point in what it prevented, in what Gettysburg could have been had not the Union Army and George Gordon Meade acted the way they did.
Also, on July 4th, 1863, you've got Braxton Bragg evacuating Middle Tennessee, opening up.
Oh, here we go again.
Yeah, Sam with his unknown battles.
I'm just saying, maybe even evacuating Middle Tennessee is more important than Vicksburg in actually affecting the direction of the war effort. I mean, Mississippi was always going to be lost to the Confederacy. It was too far away. They can't throw their lines out that far. I think the Confederacy still has a fighting shot without Vicksburg, more so than they have a fighting shot without Chattanooga.
Interesting. I disagree, but very interesting.
Interesting.
So there you have it, a half-baked idea from Robert E. Lee, followed up by some hard fighting from John Gibbon's Union Division. That sums up the turning point of the Civil War for me, gentlemen. What do you think?
Perfect.
Oh, no.
Sam disagrees. But whether you agree with this or not, guys, I want to thank you for being here today, and I thank you all for watching.
So I think it's clear that even if you study the Civil War a lot, it doesn't necessarily equate to agreement on a broad range of issues, and even specific issues such as Pickett's Charge. And whether it be Pickett's Charge, which is just one of thousands of attacks during the entire Civil War, we can learn more about them, we can study them, and get into it just a little bit more. And with that, we want to at least answer at least one of the viewer questions, and I have a question that we received here from a Will Spiva. He is from Portland, Oregon, and he said, "Last time I checked, the Civil War was a long time ago, and none of you were there. How do you really know what happened?" Well, it's a very valid question. Nobody alive was around during the Civil War. I have met people that have met Civil War veterans, so that's one way that things are passed down. But there's some more concrete ways, such as using primary sources created at the time, official reports from the officers, early maps, early photographs, early letters home, and letters back to newspapers. And between that and the battlefield and using those things in conjunction, you can really get a good idea of what happened when you read opposing accounts of something that occurred. To that, you can add post-war reminiscences and combine those with battlefields. And in short, you can take these things together and start to form a picture of it. But I've actually talked to the photo historian William Fresnito about this, who says that there are 160,000 people fighting in the Battle of Gettysburg. And although it's very well documented, we still have a tiny percentage, less than a couple of percentage points of any account from the people that participated in it. So that means that 97% or so of the battle is unaccounted for in terms of personal accounts. So we must use what we have, and we have to spend 10 or 20,000 hours studying it. War Department will continue to go out into the field, into the office, and wherever the Civil War occurred. Stay tuned for more.
Is there anything you've learned in all your studying of the Civil War? Some overarching thing that you've learned about the war you'd like to share?
I think it's maybe not about the war, but just in general, that the more I read, the more I learn. You understand that it's about personalities. People shape events, and people's relationships shape events. You know, if there's no Grant Sherman friendship, there is no victory at Vicksburg or the Atlanta campaign. Basically, the whole last half of the war hangs on that relationship. And similarly, in the early part of the war with Lee and Jackson, those relationships are what build the success or failure of any endeavor, and that's true in the Civil War, and it's true in elsewhere in life.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.